to Indigo's first alumni meet. I am Hartika and this is Tanvi. We are psychotherapists at Indigo and we are currently practicing RDBT. We are joined here by our director Swati Khanokar, who is also AEI supervisor and trainer. We are also joined here by Indigo's past alumni who have done the Albert Ellis Institute's Advanced Practicum Certificate. They are also currently practicing RDBT as therapists.
We're extremely excited and happy to have you guys here since you have been such a valued part of our Indigo community, and we've also done the AI training. So we plan to have a rich discussion about your training in RDBT with the AI, your practice, and its impact with some interesting stories. So to begin with, I'm really curious to know, how did you actually get interested in getting trained in RDBT?
So my first introduction to REBT was when I started learning psychology in college. And at that very time when I first started doing REBT along with the other therapies, I thought REBT had a certain appeal to me. Being cognitive based, being very practical and rational thinking, more than the other therapies, that was a therapy that really, really interested me. And I've always been on the lookout for good trainers as far as REBT is concerned. And I think my bar was more than matched when it came to Invivo. So yeah, that's how I started, being interested in REBT.
Okay, so I think with me, like during the college days, I think REBT was at that time called as a very rude therapy. I don't know for what reason, but I think it's because of the disputation, right? So I was really, like people even told me that this is, like, people get offended. So I was really interested in knowing that, because I had done like a few other short courses, but I think I was really interested ki, let me see ki, kitna, like, is it actually rude, is it? But I think when I actually did REBT, I realized it's actually a very sensitive approach. And I think when I learned REBT from Swati ma'am initially, I think the local training that ma'am was running, and then I did AEI training, and I think that really added a lot of value to me as a person as well as my practice. So
Okay. I think unlike you guys, we had a very brief introduction to REBT at the master's level. I think we were generally taught cognitive behavioral therapies without really understanding in terms of how the course structure lies or how to really practice it. And I think it was just a chance finding. So Swati was one of the very few ones who was conducting, I think, trainings in like specialization in therapy. And she was already a trainer, so that for us that was, I think I looked up to that, and I had expectation from the training, and I think definitely it surpassed it. And I think when I came for the first course at that particular time, REBT was introduced, I think, more structured manner. I think she used to make us do mock sessions in REBT, and I think that gave more of an experiential learning, unlike anything that we had learned at the college level. So I think that's where I really got interested in thinking, and it resonated with me, I think, personally, because as we used to be also clients at that particular time, not just therapists, and I think that's when I was like, okay, if it makes sense to me, I would like to continue with that. And her teaching style and the training being there, the guidance being there, I think really helped to go forward with that.
this was in 2012.
Yes, it was in 2012. Yes.
Wow,
And
that's
I think
quite interesting.
that was an important point. I just want to add that when you have been at the receiving end of a therapy as a client, if it resonates with you, if you found that it's helping you to deal with your own problems, I think you're going to be more convinced in using it with your clients. I think that's an experience all of us would agree with. Yeah.
So, and in fact, REBT is then more than just a therapeutic model. It's also a lifestyle philosophy, something to apply in your day-to-day living. Do you have any personal takeaways or any personal ways that you use REBT in your life personally, individually?
Yeah, I think, sorry. Yeah, go ahead, Gauri.
Yes, this is, I think, what drew me to REBT also in the first place. Just when we read about it in a textbook, I think it was a paragraph about this size, if I'm not wrong. And I wanted to know more about it. I wanted to know where I could learn. And luckily, a colleague of mine at another place I was working at back in 2019, perhaps, she said to me, "Oh, I practice REBT, I've done my course." I said, "Wait, there's a course? That's amazing." And then I called her up after that. She gave me all the details about Indigo. And that's how I found the AEI training also. And yeah, I think through the course, we also realized that you can just use it on a daily basis. And again, from the experience of being client in peer supervision and seeing each and every one during peer supervision, it's not like we do peer supervision in tandem, right? It's we're observing every single couple. I think that's very unique to this training also, and I think that also enabled me to just use it in daily life. Whenever I'm distressed, I think finally after all these years of really trying hard, I can finally go to, okay, what am I demanding now? So eventually I've reached that point, and I think I have to, it is hard for clients when I use it with them. They're like, "Oh, I can't remember it when I'm in the depths of distress." And I'm like, "Hold on, it's taken me about 5 years. So take your time, but the regularity of practice helps you do that. And it just helps on a general day-to-day basis now.
Yeah. Definitely.
Totally. I think one of the things that REBT taught me is incredible patience. I mean, not just with the opposite person, but with yourself first. Because, you can still find it to be patient with others, but to have that same amount of patience with yourself and to give that leeway to understand and to kind of dig into the depths of your own psyche is not the most easiest. I mean, I think psychology for that has been life-changing, and REBT has been even more of a game changer for me as far as that is concerned. So in everyday life, in helping deal with emotions, because come on, at the end of it, all of us are humans, so it's not like we're not going to have emotions. A lot of times, I'm sure you all will come to us and say, "No, but you're a psychologist. How can you, do this?" But REBT definitely, like what we said, helps in so many different ways. And one of the things is definitely incredible patience. So that is definitely my biggest takeaway as far as REBT on a personal level is concerned, for sure. You guys want to add?
I agree that REBT definitely teaches us patience, but I think one thing that two things in fact. One is that I think REBT has it's deeply ingrained that I think even ma'am keeps saying courage over confidence. I think that has really stayed with me, that I don't need to feel prepared, feel settled, or even be prepared to deal with a client, or know that I need to be perfect as a therapist before I take on that session. I think it has taught me to bear the discomfort of just being in that moment, and just that is also learning to trust myself that I will. It's the pain in the neck, and not the end of the world. So I think that really helped me overall in my life. So I keep telling myself that courage. How can I be? How can I choose courage?
Right.
So
in that sense, I think that makes sense what you said. And also, I mean, I thought an overlapping point was what teaches us patience, the courage over confidence, etc. The overlapping point is, and to me, and I think many of my clients a very helpful takeaway is the self-acceptance. The underpinning everything, the idea that I don't have to be perfect or confident or fully prepared or anything really as a condition to accept myself. I think that concept also stays with, I don't know if in your experience also, but definitely my experience stays a lot with clients. That I don't have to be either this or that I can be both smart and stupid. I can be both good at things and bad at things. And I can accept the whole. So I think I find that to be a very big takeaway, even for me.
I mean, we talk about the circle analogy where this big circle is made of smaller white and black circles. The whole circle is like entirely white or black, so it's not good or bad. It's a mixture of both, and it's ever evolving.
That's such a good analogy.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah, and in fact, that visual representation really helps our clients also to understand the whole concept and overcome the whole self-esteem issue or self-confidence issues, whatever they are.
Yeah.
So, do you guys also have such techniques that you guys practice with your clients, and probably something that has really stuck with them during your practice?
Yes.
So the self-acceptance for sure is, as a whole, I would say yes, the most impactful for clients, but it's also the most frustrating, I think, because the frequency with which it comes up in no matter what adversity or specific adversity we're using and discussing in each session or over time, it keeps coming up again this, like yes, but that's what it's all coming down to. And when they understand that, and there's that little aha, that insight that comes in, and they have something to like take that away and use outside session. And yes, analogies, metaphors really help. And I remember Swati ma'am had shared, and this she had shared in the context of teaching children this concept with the house.
That's a favorite one.
And I think I had one client who came many months later with a house tattoo.
Wow.
I was very scared.
Wow.
Because I joke about this with all of them. And they're like, oh, how do I remember this in the moment though? I think you need to get a tattoo about it. And then they took it seriously. Yes, but thankfully it wasn't just for this reason. I was relieved. But I think that's one that really helps.
Yeah,
The house
that sounds good.
Getting a tattoo. Yes, I'm not shocked at first. But I think in the training, that's another thing that always is very striking for me, is that we're encouraged to use our imagination and our creativity to, not just with the unconditional self-acceptance, but with any other concept, even with disputing. And I think even Dr. Ryder and Swati ma'am, they both always use that. And sometimes where has this come from? But it just makes such a big difference for the clients. And I think REBT affords and allows you to do that in practice, which keeps it interesting and challenging for me as a practitioner. I find it's not just go ABC and then dispute it, and it's not just that anymore. It goes beyond, and you keep building on it. I like that.
Okay. Anyone else, any techniques with your clients?
So I'm not sure if this is a technique, but I think the part that we use, which is the shame attack exercise, I think I want to highlight the experiential learning that sometimes we focus on, because we always talk about this, that okay, we intellectually understand the difference between rational and irrational, but sometimes the clients will keep asking this question, how do you kind of look at it, and how do I understand it? I know this, but then I've just not completely absorbed it. And I think it was also harder for me as an individual to kind of go to that emotional acceptance or going towards the flexibility. So I think shame attack exercise is something that I kind of risk taking, shame attack exercises, these things I think give that kind of an experiential learning. And I think that's what I have been trying to kind of get my client to use, rather than just dispute it, on the way. Of course, disputation works very well, and I think that is needed before we start getting them to kind of do the experiential work. If I do systematic desensitization for anxiety also, I would use it in the framework of rational versus irrational. So I think those kind of techniques are something that have been working very well for my clients. So definitely that's something great.
That's interesting. What you want to say something? Go ahead. I mean, all of the techniques are things that I think all of us use, and it helps. And the other thing which apart from the sessions, because in the sessions, most of the clients are fully present in doing it, but the homework after, that is something that I believe is a total game changer, because no other therapy will give you that kind of structured but still unstructured homework. And when they do the work on themselves and they start doing it and they're doing it on a regular basis, and then they see that it's something that they don't necessarily need us to do it for them, but it's something that they're able to do on their own. Of course, it comes with a certain amount of sessions and all, but that, I think the homework is something that really kind of helps to push it through or makes it more clearer and helps them definitely. So that's something that outside of the session but still part of the thing.
Yeah.
Done. So I've been thinking while listening to these answers also that, I'm kind of imagining all of you using these techniques with your clients, and we're talking a lot about flexibility, we're talking about tolerance, rigidity, acceptance, these ideas. And something that I wanted to just check with all of you is, because this question is asked to me quite often, which is that does a therapy like REBT, which has originated in the West, does it work in the Indian cultural context? Right? We're talking about how you guys are using it, and so I really would like you guys to talk about how do you think it fits with the Indian cultural context, in your opinion?
I realized this when I was thinking about just this conversation that we were going to have, and this point came up which hasn't occurred to me so explicitly before, is that there is a multicultural kind of teaching that happens in the training as well, even though Dr. Ryder is not Indian, of course. But the way he deals with all the concerns that come up no matter what, and of course he has his humor to it, which is always amusing. But just the way he does it, and just the way he takes us through those conversations, I think it's a very implicit learning that happens that you can easily and seamlessly apply it here. Sure, we can be mindful of those specific cultural differences and use that to elevate the therapy. We need to do that, of course. We can't be oblivious to it. But coming as an Indian person who's lived here for the majority of my life, I see that it is applicable. I can see the hesitation from the outside perspective, but being in it and using it, it's not that hard. It translates very easily.
Right.
Yeah, and I think the training really helped to do that. Maybe it wouldn't have been so easy to do it had I just been, reading some books and learning something myself.
Yeah.
In fact, interestingly, I also have something to add, because before I got trained in REBT and chose psychology in the first place, I have also been a philosophy student, and which is why probably REBT as a philosophy resonated so much, because even there are a lot of overlappings from the Indian philosophy as well. Whenever we talk about acceptance or tolerance, flexibility, our scriptures, ancient scriptures have been talking about it. It's just that we've not probably adapted it properly, and REBT as a therapy then provides that structure perfectly in that. So practicing REBT and getting trained therefore as therapists also is probably one great thing that definitely people or psychology students should be looking forward to.
It's true. I think then I would agree on both these points. That one, it could translate and it can be adapted to the cultural settings or the cultural philosophies that we have. And yes, it does have parallels also with the Indian psychotherapy. So just to give you an example, I have had clients who have come from Buddhism, let's say, or follow Buddhism. I've had clients who, so just recently I had a client who is a practitioner of Adhyatma, so spirituality. And both of these clients, so when they describe what they follow in their day-to-day life as their personal philosophy or individual philosophy, it was so much closer to what we practiced. And I think it then got a little easier, and then also sort of like accommodate what they were already practicing into their mental health practice. And that definitely helps. So Buddhism, as she said, has certain parallels in terms of tolerance and acceptance already being there. The way he explained, and he basically took 10 minutes to explain to me what he was practicing. And initially he was not willing to take therapy because he thought that was already doing the spirituality thing and he doesn't need help, which was true. He was also coping on his own as well. But when he saw that there is a therapy that is actually closer to what he's practicing, he was much more willing to kind of, take some more things from me and then kind of use it. So I think on both these points, it is really, useful still in the Indian context.
Alright, so then talking about getting trained or practicing REBT, coming back to the training aspect, there are so many trainings, probably certified, uncertified, a lot of practices happening in the field. How to choose the right training as a student then? What do you think? And in fact, he was also a professor in colleges, so then how should a student choose that?
I think so. Don't choose it because it's in vivo, first of all. And I think one of the points that I would like to make, I think a few things that I think we have also discussed previously is one, the trainer needs to be trained themselves. I think that is lacking at times in most of the training that we see. The second thing I usually recommend to my students to kind of say that first you can experience the training first. But if you want, you can of course look at the therapy and see if that personally resonates with you, or if you would like to, practice that. There's nothing wrong in doing something different than cognitive behavioral model. But if you really want to do cognitive behavioral model, then go for that. The third thing, within cognitive behavioral model also, I think there are so many different trainings that are available. Within that, I think since REBT mainly, I think according to me, has the most evidence-based approach, right? Which means that it has already shown effectiveness in research. So I generally tell the students that go for something that has already shown you the evidence for it. And I think finally one of the things that I would say is that with the evidence-based training and the psychoeducative approach, I think the focus that this training has in terms of also helping your clients become more independent in taking care of their mental health. So choose a therapy or a training that is going to show you how to do that. So these are few of the points I think that I would kind of tell my students to follow before choosing the training. So I forgot about this. The one that gives you, as I said earlier, experiential understanding, right? You need to go through it, and I think Swati's training as well as Albert Ellis Institute training do give you that opportunity. Just if somebody is there and instructing, didactically and not letting you learn it by experiencing it, then that's not the training for you.
When it comes to REBT now, because I've been learning it since a while now, I have done more trainings. I have done trainings from people or institutions other than in vivo. And the reason I chose in vivo is because for the longest time, although I've known Swati for a while, I didn't know that the trainings were happening or that, and it was accidentally that I came across the first one. And that's when I was like, because I have seen her teaching and I know how good she is at it. And I have done trainings with other trainers as well, like Ruti correctly mentioned. It's just a one-way training. You're not learning anything, you're only listening to a lecture, and that can only take you so far. A training has to have experiential learning. That is the very definition of a training. Otherwise, it's just a lecture. And I think that is where in vivo so at the end, Professor Jai did this. Just deliver it perfect. There's not two ways. No, so while choosing your training, experiential learning, of course, is important, and which is a part of the trainings that we do here at Invivo. And I think that point about whether or not the therapy that you're getting trained in resonates with you, is I think it's helpful, and tell me if you guys agree, I think it's helpful if your trainer is a clinician as well. Meaning that they are practicing therapists. Correct. Because I can say as a trainer that I can only bring so much to the training based on my academic knowledge. But if I'm practicing, then what I can bring to the training in terms of examples, right? My journey, mistakes that I have made, how have I learned from them, all of that. That I think is
isn't it? So helps to have a trainer who's also practicing.
I know that we're talking about the therapy side and the training side. This is definitely, I would definitely agree with you on that. For the past few years, I think our field has been, especially since I come to clinical psychology and also recruiting faculty at times,
Yes.
there is a lot of uncertainty going on in the field in terms of certification and licensing.
Right.
Unfortunately, I know that many people would like to know the concrete answer. Even we don't have it at times at that level. And when I tell the students are really anxious. They don't know what's going to happen in the next few months or even years. Probably, they need to do further training. Do they need to do MPhil or PhD? It just, very, very uncertain at this point. So what happens is that with this kind of a training, which is one, professional training, secondly, it's an international training, and it provides you a sort of like a certification. So it's a certificate. I don't want to deny that I know that it's not just about the certificate, but the certificate really adds the weightage and the value for the upcoming psychologist. And with the uncertainty, so when with the current developments, even for us, it was a little bit difficult to establish our set of roots or kind of confidently say that I can practice. And I think AI certificate at that time came in handy really. It was so useful because I could say to people that I have a certification in a specialized therapy and an international certificate. And I think that in itself acts sort of like a sort of license to practice RMBT for us. So that definitely gives value. People know and other professionals know that we have the skills, and at the same time, we can say that we can practice as a psychotherapist who specializes in it. So that definitely is going to be some added advantage with this training.
So what drove y'all to do a specialized training like the Albert Ellis Institute's certificate training?
So I was already, trained under, with Swati ma'am earlier, and I was already using REBT as an approach in my therapy sessions. But, I think the AEI training helped me polish my skills even better. Like, I was more didactic in my approach. I think I learned the questioning and the motivational interviewing part really well in, the goal setting part really well is the AEI training, because that was very, there were peer supervision sessions which were, I think, very specific to, doing certain kind of techniques like intervention training and all of that. So that really helped me work on my skills. So, Riddhi, but I also want to understand, so after having done training with me at Edvivo, and the point in your career at which you were, you see, what led you to think that now you should do an internationally certified training in REBT, and how did you think it was going to help you in your career at that point? I think, it was definitely, the certification. And because like Trupti said, that the certification does play a very important role at times. I think with the AEI training, I think some amount of practice that I already did with your training, that pushed me further to really understand that what more, because if it is an international training and it was such a it was, I think, 5 days that when we did 7 days. So then I knew that there was a lot to look forward to, the amount of practice also that happened in that session was really great. So what pushed me was already whatever training I was doing with you, ma'am, that really added a lot of value to me as a therapist. So then that further up the game. So, right. Okay. Yeah. So honestly, with the AEI training, I think you already have the training. I mean, we've all done the trainings, whether we've done it with you or we've done it as well. And then the AEI training elevates it to another level. If I may put it like that, because it's not just the international certification; it's the international certification from the Albert Ellis Institute. That's the mother, everything of REBT. And
the entire training with you, with Professor Dryden, it just completely, whether you're practicing it full time, whether you're doing it only on a consultation basis, whether you're teaching, I think it just ups the game for you as an individual because you're backing your solid training with a solid certification. A win-win that situation.
I can clearly remember when that point was in terms of wanting to do an international training. I think it was the best part about doing the training at BU because one of the things that you have said that, your trainings were great, we were able to kind of use it and utilize it into practice. But you kind of said that the international training can also give exposure to, let's say, other trainers' teachings. And that that's a requirement, right? And you have followed that throughout that. You have made sure that you are one of the trainers and there is another trainer. And for me, I think that was Christina. Right. And she had come down for our training, then I've observed Professor Dryden's as well. And I think that was the highlight where you had mentioned that this is why you should do the training, the international training. And I think that time I had also discussed with you whether I should go to New York, but thankfully you were bringing it down to exactly at the same time. And I was like, you kind of told me that, okay, if you want, you can wait, and then people will be coming down and she can do it with us. So I think that was a clear kind of a requirement, or I think that was the reason why the international training was there. Right. Of course, including all these points, but the exposure to somebody else's styles, their own experience with the therapy comes in when they are giving you feedback. Of course, you get different kind of feedback from different supervisors. It stays with the RBT, but it's beautifully their own style, and the flexibility comes in at that time. So I can clearly remember that is why I was like, I need to do the international training. Of course, alongside with that, there was much more learning.
Right.
I think it's vast, right? It's so comprehensive. So I think that's also another highlight of doing the international training for me.
Right.
Yeah.
Another thing that when she mentioned about going to New York, that was something that I was like, I want to go to New York and do this. When will I be able to go? What can I do? How can I do that? Then when you brought it here, I think having done it here, gives a better added advantage for the simple reason to go back to the Indian context because Professor Dryden was the international context and Swati adds the Indian context to it.
Yeah.
So the applicability of it, the way we can work within the the environment that we are in, that understanding or that application, that bridging of a gap happened beautifully, which I don't know whether it would have happened in that perfect manner if I had done it in New York itself. So I think that is also a big asset, I think, that added advantage of having both the international as
Western
well as
and Indian.
the
Yeah.
Indian. I think
It's the best of both worlds,
It's the
isn't
best
it?
of both worlds.
Whether you have, I think, Professor Doyle or Professor Dryden, they're stalwarts in the field and they're the leading authorities. They write the textbooks that we learn from. And Swati ma'am brings the Indian context and the expertise within this culture. So it's really the best of both worlds.
So peer counseling, everyone's been talking about a lot. And I think let's sort of bring a little bit of focus.
Zero in on that.
So I don't know if our audience knows what that is. That is that you are working with your peer, practicing, but the practice is not a mock practice. Like someone said, that they are presenting their real problem and you're using whatever you've learned that far in therapy to help them with that problem. And your supervisor, that's I think really the highlight of it, is that the supervisor is watching you do it and giving you feedback, live feedback, and then we can learn from that feedback. I mean, I remember as a student when I first went to New York and did my trainings with the Albert Ellis Institute, this was my biggest takeaway from the training, that this experience. And there was this one year I remember where they were wrapping up this, the big Albert Ellis Institute building, was they were shifting from there, they were moving from there. So that one year they had brought in supervisors from across the world.
Wow.
So there were so many different people with so many different contexts
kinds of experience, and like Neha was saying, also different cultural contexts. And that's when I realized that it really does help to have supervisors who are practicing in digital contexts.
Yes.
But also practicing REBT in their own style, which is varied. And that shows us as students that it doesn't have to be practiced exactly in the same way. That you can kind of make it your own when you practice it. So just any sort of takeaway from your peer counseling experience, anything that you particularly remember, including you girls, I mean, anyone who's done the training, of course. So, anything, any personal experience from the peer counseling, any feedback that you got from your supervisor that stayed with you?
Yeah, in fact, I remember one. I have. So while giving supervision, during supervision, I remember one thing about Professor Dryden. He has different varied techniques that he uses to give supervision. And one such thing is red flag. That has really stuck with me because every time you use a AC connection or you have to establish the BC connection, that flag will come and then you remember. So even right now when we practice with our clients, if we, at least that's happened with me now, that when I make that mistake, I somehow suddenly remember Professor Dryden and his flag. Right. And then I correct myself. So these techniques then really stay back. So that's my unique takeaway from the peer counseling sessions, for sure.
Do you guys remember the red flag as he played tree? Yeah, like.
Yeah, proud. Yes. Yeah, there's a.
Which he will just start waving it.
Yeah.
Start waving it. No, which is indicating to the student that okay,
You have to stop.
Yeah, and I mean, he's just stays brilliant. And you don't need to see the flag any longer. You can imagine.
You can
clearly,
yeah.
The genie.
The lamp.
The lamp. Yeah, the lamp. For the wish, for the demand, I think. Yeah.
Clearly remember my first year. It was 16 and it was by that time I think I knew what steps I was supposed to utilize, and I was doing that, and it was just out of the blue that she said is that you did everything properly, but then you didn't stay with the client, and that has stuck with me. So that's where I realized that it's not just about utilizing the steps, but using the steps in your therapy with a client. So we are, focused on where your client is and where you're taking your client. And that was, I think that has stuck with me throughout, even right now. Like, I remember not doing therapy just but that kind of, to stay with your client, knowing, whether it's working for your client, whether they are there with you on the journey or not. I think that has stuck with me. I think the second part of the peer supervision session, I think we used to do this, is the beautiful part is that you get to observe other. Yes. Not just you're giving you feedback, but
Observe,
and we used to kind of sit and kind of write down the ABCs as somebody else is doing it. And so that's even more learning. And we used to kind of figure out, she did it differently. I would have done it really this way. Right. And then it's also good to kind of ask questions at that particular time. So that helps to see, okay, maybe there are different ways of doing it, like in the same context. So I think that's the second point that it's really highlight.
So just responding to what you said, Trupti, that I know my therapy, I know my steps, I could write a book on it, right? That's great, but then it's not the exact same thing as being effective for your client. So is your client being helped by it? Are we staying with the client, like you said? And is the client experiencing the outcome? And if that's not happening, then the efficiency is going to be limited. Therapeutically, you're not then being effective. I think that distinction is important. I think all of us, even I sort of resonated with that I bear that in mind when I'm working. So, thanks.
Another point, in fact, that what I remembered was it is also a lot of practice, not by, as a therapist when you are doing the training, practicing as a therapist, but the whole case conceptualization that you said, you have 8 different cases and you conceptualize everything, and that itself has a lot of practice, and you feel like you said, you feel like, oh, I would have done it differently. Oh, I got this ABC. How is it wrong? How is it right? So that itself has a lot of practice.
What about so as a supervisor for peer counseling, what's your perspective on the other side of the table of things? Because I also remember, I don't know if you guys have the shared experience, but being very, very anxious for peer counseling, extremely anxious, constantly on edge. Oh, how are they going to evaluate me? How am I going to be judged for this? So,
Yes, of course. I mean, overall, the idea of, how we structure the training is that we want REBT to become more accessible to students. That's in fact what Albert Ellis Institute wants. That we want it to be a structured approach that can be learned. It's not something that you just read about or learn as a theory, but that can be learned in a way that it handholds you to practicing it. Right? So that's the idea, which is why peer counseling is such an important part of the training. But also, if we look at the lectures and where, besides the fundamentals of REBT, there are topics like learning from errors, or how do you help your client overcome their resistance. There's a reason why those topics are a part of the curriculum. That we're thinking this is where students as in budding therapists will need more. That somebody pointed out to them what are some of the potential errors that you can make, right? Or errors that could come with the way REBT is practiced. So we're kind of anticipating it, we're learning about it.
yeah.
And that's very helpful. Or what do you do with resistance? Because clients are not deliberately resisting. There's a reason why what we're calling resistance might happen. How do you see it and how do you address it? So there's a lot of thought put in designing that training, which is and the purpose being, how do we help our students to start practicing REBT after they've done their advanced certification? And that's the aim even in peer counseling.
You're right.
Now, supervision is not assessment in peer counseling. It's feedback.
Yeah.
And so the idea is that the student starts with us on day one of primary. And how can we help them get better every day? Such that they can see the progress by the last day of the advanced.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's been your experience as well, right? If when you look back at 7 days of your own performance.
Yeah. So I think progress, not perfection. That helped me a lot. I think of this as progress, not perfection from day one.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so since you brought up being anxious, etc., I was also wondering, what were your struggles during the training? I mean, before you registered, but before it started, were you anxious? And during, and if some of your concerns got addressed during the training, maybe your thoughts on that.
I would like to add that I think some of the students are anxious because I have also seen some students go through the training. So some of them have also mentioned this thing that since they're part of the field, it takes a little while for you to also understand certain things. Other difficulties, I think, is just that. But that is something, again, as I'm saying, the trainers do help, is that sometimes conceptually, once you have learned something, a lot of the time it's difficult to put it into practice. So it's like theory. Then you have immediately the peer counseling happening. So students used to say that I understood it conceptually, but then I don't know how to do it. But I think that's where the trainers come in. So I think that the difficulties are there. But at the same time, it's designed in such a way and you guys take care of it in such a way that I think it helps you overcome.
Yeah.
There's no gap. It's not. And I think one of the best thing about this is that you can anytime go to a trainer and ask for help.
Yeah.
So I think we don't feel that much difficulty in okay, I can go and ask and figure out something with the trainer. So I think that helps.
Yeah. And in this context, I just remember what Professor Dryden always says, when we also remember that it's got to be challenging, but not overwhelming.
Yeah.
So from the other side, I'd say that in conducting the training, we do want it to be challenging.
Yeah.
So we do want clients, students to be challenged, to be hustling, to kind of put together what they've learned and try to put it in practice and struggle with the practice. And in a way, you're also sort of using what you've learned in terms of accepting yourself while making all those mistakes, even during the training.
Yeah.
So you're kind of taking the learning from the training and using it. I mean, that's our intention. And so that's understandable if that's challenging for some students.
But it's also interesting, and maybe I want to know from you guys, what made it worth it for you to decide that I want to do the training? Because now, of course, we have this experience. But for students, how do they then decide that, okay, let's go for it? So when you were at that stage,
Many students will ask us, we
Right.
want to do it, but how do we decide that it's worth it for us to invest this amount of money at this stage in this trip?
I think you should take a survey with all the students who are kind. I think if you're asking me the difference between how, while we took the decision and kind of whether now in hindsight, whether this is big worth it or not, definitely it's very worth it. I think the financial investment is there, but if we talk about the value that structured training has, the certification, the professional part of this coursework has. Like I said, when I go out in the field, AI has the reputation, Indigo has the reputation, and not just a reputation for the namesake. I think it's a reputation to say that, okay, your trainings would be done properly. We know that you have gone through a sort of proper check, and it's a valid and reliable certificate that you're talking, right? So definitely was worth it. It was worth it to also kind of how do I say this, establish that kind of a philosophy, a professional philosophy, if you can say. So I have an organization of my own right now. I'm establishing it right now. But when it comes to time to kind of thinking, okay, how me and my colleague, how would you like to do this, or what kind of communication you want to have with your clients? How do you want to portray yourself? I think we used REBT throughout over there as well. So that helped to kind of have the confidence. It also helped to kind of have a backing for your own values and your vision and mission for our organization also. So I think definitely clients have increased, clients have more faith in the practice when they see that you're trained properly. So I think that adds to our practice,
Definitely.
according to me. And I think your confidence comes from it. Like it just being there in front of the client and knowing what you're doing is, I think, the best value that this training must have been, according to me.
Yeah, so, I mean, if you can't quantify, I mean, that's just not possible. You can't quantify it and say, this is going to be equal to this. But the sheer amount of personal and professional learning that you get from a specialized training is unbeatable. So whether it's worth it, 100% it's worth it. And I understand that when students are young or when they're starting in their career, it is something that they need to be mindful of, or they need to think about it. But it's not an expense, it's an investment. It's an investment in your career. And if you want to grow, then I think it's, fair to say that rather than doing trainings which are going to be on the cheaper side and then you're not learning anything, it's a one-shot investment which is going to give you returns throughout your career. So then 100% something that is totally 100% good. Investment is the right word, because I think when you're doing like a practice and with, say for example, when I'm also struggling, even now I know I can go back to my notes and know like the examples that were given, the kind of feedback also that was given. I think that all turns us into a better therapist. I think all the points that all of you mentioned, and even staying with that mind, I think before I did the training, I was also like When I did that training and when I went through the supervision, I think that really helped, how to stay with the client.
One thing that I'm just recollecting now as we're speaking, back then I think I saw it as, this is the first or second stepping stone into further learning. Like there's more after the time in advance, they have associate fellowship, etc. And I think I saw it as, okay, let's start with this, and then there's more. So it wasn't like, shall I? Yes, it's a big investment, I know, but it's not, is this going to be the first step to more? And yes, that is also going to be at the expense, but yes, investment. I'm going somewhere up. This is taking me somewhere. I'm going through a sense of professional. And I think that's what perhaps made it less difficult to put in that investment. I knew I had like a path. It's not just a 1 year course, that's it. Yeah.
So, if we talk about your careers before and after doing the AI's training, what has that trajectory looked like? What's that growth looked like for each of you?
I think before, I do in the AEI training, I think it was me trying to, just know what the client's problem is. And, sometimes I think like the major struggle that I used to have was figure out the client's goal. I think after doing the AEI training, it gave me like a structure as to what is the purpose that the client is coming here for, and how I as a therapist can add more value. I think it also opened for me that I don't have to stick to one particular way. I can incorporate and add my own learnings as a therapist and also as a person into the therapy session. I think it did, help me a lot as a therapist to develop, because then I also understood that there's no one particular way of doing, like even practicing a certain technique. You have your own practice.
Yes.
So like how Trupti was saying earlier, would you say this confidence that you just described in your ability as a therapist then also gave you the confidence to start your practice? Does it translate there? Yes, definitely. Like I was seeing 1-2 clients earlier as a part-time therapist, but I think doing this course definitely helped me believe in myself that I can see more clients. And I think one thing that I realized is through this training is that nobody is perfect. Like we are all like work in progress. We are all going to like, it doesn't stop there. I think like the training, like the learnings from the training doesn't stop. There's a lot more that we have to learn. So definitely that added more confidence to me as a therapist, when I knew that I would figure it out like after this training.
Instead, I left the training feeling it was. I didn't feel lost in the dark. I'm going to have to still figure it out. No, I felt like, yes, of course I will learn and go and make mistakes, but I didn't feel lost. I think that was like incredibly hard. I thought it was very empowering as a young professional at that point. And I think my practice is now a lot more interesting for clients also, after having seen the trainers and the facilitators do the demonstrations and pass out.
The fact that REBT is a trans diagnostic, right? And that's what is also partly what you're saying, that the model is such that then it lends itself to being applied to different clinical problems, but also different developmental goals, right? And therefore can be applied in other areas as well, not just in the psychotherapy setting. And I'm glad to hear you say that, Trupti, because that's been my feedback. Feedback to us from different students who are using it not just as psychotherapists, really in schools, in corporates, right? In any kind of organization that you're working with, any kind of specialization in terms of the clientele that you work with. It can be adapted. It needs to be adapted, of course, but it lends itself to being adapted. And in that sense, I think just to kind of tie up the investment question, I feel like, because in my experience, budding students of psychology are often concerned whether it's going to be a lucrative profession. This can't be a full-time profession. You only make this much money, etc. And then with that perspective, of course, if you're going to invest this kind of money in an international certification, then it may seem not worth it. But the exact other angle on it is that why are we aiming low? That if there is a model that once I make that one-time investment really in the training, of course, learning doesn't end with the training. But the training gives me the fundamentals, the foundation, which is so solid that then I can spread myself and start to look at how to apply it to various different areas. Then why should there be a ceiling to how much we can do as psychologists? In terms of making a lucrative career as a psychologist. So that's it. I think the investment has full potential to pay off later. I think that's just the way we've got to look at it.
Some common queries, in fact, that we do get from students who want to register, and this is probably a question for Trupti specifically, is that I've just done my master's. Why do I need another training, or why do I need to do another certificate at this point? Do you feel like there is a need even after you've completed your undergrad, your master's, to take up a specialized training in REBT or in any?
Okay, so two things I want to mention. So I have had different perspectives where other professors or lecturers have told the students that you need to get some experience after your master's and then do a specialized training. I don't agree with that point of view, because in the students that I've seen just do guidance, what happens at master's level is that the syllabus is great. It's not like they're not teaching you anything, but it's just not possible within the 1 year that you have, which is the second year that you're really doing your specialization.
Yeah.
It's not enough to teach you the therapies, and I think they try to teach you everything, which is good. You should know, you should have an introduction to all the different therapies that are out there, but that's just not enough. So it's not practically possible for them to kind of give you a specialized training in a specific therapy. So if anybody says that you either get an experience or immediately after masters, this is not needed. So I disagree with that. Like I said, I've seen students go out, and even professionals who have not done specialized training after their masters are just trying to either do an eclectic approach, which they are struggling with because they don't know how to use the eclectic approach properly, or they're doing guidance. So I definitely think that immediately after your masters, if you go into therapy specifically, more specialized doing, then that is definitely going to help. So that's the right time. I think we have also done it. I think just
immediately after.
I think that definitely helps.
Yeah.
Wow, that's very interesting. And in fact, this has been a very rich discussion. And it was great catching up with everyone and seeing all the great things that are up to with your individual careers. So thank you so much for being a part of this discussion and taking our time to be here. We truly appreciate that.
Thank you to our viewers for watching this video. If you have any suggestions or comments, do drop us in the comment section or feel free to get in touch with us. Thank you.